On a morning in November 2012, a 23-year-old university student walked into Wilson Airport carrying a bag full of cash. His name was Jeffrey Sila. At the time, most students his age were sitting in lecture halls, worrying about assignments, exams, and rent. But Jeffrey had skipped class, as he had come to buy airplanes. Inside the office, an aircraft manager listened carefully as the young man explained what he wanted: a two-seater and a four-seater. The manager was stunned. Who was this kid? Jeffrey looked too young, too relaxed, and far too wealthy. Yet the cash was real, and the planes he wanted were real. And before the day was over, Jeffrey would become the owner of 2 Cessna aircrafts. For most students his age, owning a car would have been a dream, but Jeffrey was buying planes. What nobody knew was that the money behind Jeffrey's rise had not come from business, inheritance, or student loans. The trail stretched thousands of kilometers away from Kenya, across the Atlantic, and deep into one of the largest tax fraud conspiracies ever uncovered in the United States. A criminal enterprise built by members of his own family was slowly stealing from unsuspecting people. And despite international manhunts and the fall of the first generation, the business did not die. Instead, it was handed down, and Jeffrey was next in line. Long before Jeffrey bought airplanes, there was Paul, Jeffrey's grandfather. This was the man who started it all. In the late 1990s, Paul left Kenya for the United States, and at the time, moving to America was a dream shared by thousands of Africans. He eventually settled in Kansas, but reality would later hit him hard. The success stories he had heard back home were nowhere to be seen. Instead, life became a cycle of work. He had to go from one job to another, and sometimes even a third, to keep his lights on. The American dream was proving far more difficult than he had imagined. But Paul wasn't ready to give up, as he wanted more. And eventually, someone showed him a shortcut in identity theft. It was a simple but highly profitable scheme that targeted elderly Americans living in nursing homes. Their personal information would be stolen, their social security details used to create fraudulent tax refund claims, and once the money arrived, the fraudsters disappeared. The business worked very well. Millions began flowing in, but there was a problem. Paul relied on brokers to obtain the stolen identities, and the brokers charged heavily for their services. The more money he made, the more he hated sharing it. So Paul decided to build his own operation, one he could fully control. But for that to happen, he needed 2 things: a trusted tax preparer and people with access to elderly patients, people he could trust and they wouldn't betray him. So, in 2003, Paul returned to Kenya and began recruiting. The first person he approached was his daughter, Monica Ndungi. At the time, Monica was working as a teacher in Machakos. Paul convinced her to leave her job, and then he sponsored her relocation to the United States, as her new role would be very different. She would become a caregiver. Next to be recruited were his 2 nieces, Lillian Nzongi and Loretta Wavinya. Both were brought into the plan, but each had different assignments. Loretta was an accounting graduate, and Paul sponsored her training and examinations so she could become an enrolled agent for her to qualify to work as a professional tax preparer. Lillian, on the other hand, was a KMTC graduate, and she would also become a caregiver, like Monica. And all together, they would help build the network Paul needed.